Hello everyone and welcome to the HobbyGuard. In today's video I will be reviewing the book Warhammer 40,000 Armageddon Season of Fire, which you can see on screen right now. This is from the website warhammer.com, so yeah, that's the official website right there. And this book is by Jude Reid. This is the book that got released along with the newest edition of the tabletop game Warhammer 40,000, and yeah, it's all about Armageddon, particularly Hive Tartarus, if I recall correctly. And if this is your first time watching one of my reviews, of which, by the way, I haven't done one in a good while and really wanted to get back to it. If this is your first time, I don't really rate books. I do like a first spoiler-free review and then a full spoiler review. And I don't rate books, more so I just tell people what they might expect to find in this book, and also I share with them some of my impressions. So if you like a specific genre or type of writing or type of book, I will just let you know what you might hope or expect to find in Armageddon Season of Fire by Jude Reid. So I will begin with a spoiler-free version of the review, and I don't know if I'll end up splitting it in two videos as I usually do, but maybe I'll just give a warning before I go into full-on spoilers. So with that being said, get comfy. I will be playing, by the way, showing some gameplay in the background of Battle Sector, playing as the Blood Angels because it's well within the theme of the video. And there you go, just some Battle Sector for all my ADHD little angels like myself. And so yeah, Armageddon Season of Fire by Jude Reid. So I am very conflicted. First impressions, okay, it is definitely, I think, more enjoyable to me. It is of better quality, it is more impactful. There was more engagement, emotional engagement with the characters than in the previous 10th edition release book, like the novel that released along with 10th edition, which was Leviathan. And I also read that novel. I didn't review it because I didn't have this channel yet, but it was meh. It was very okay. Now, Armageddon Season of Fire, I think it's a book that's taken with a lot more, I don't want to say seriousness, because everyone who writes a book has to take them with seriousness, but let's say just heart. And yeah, it just feels more personal. Like the characters, we follow mainly 3 characters along the book. This book is very and this is not a spoiler because it reads so in the description and everything of the novel itself. This book is split into 3 stories basically, and we follow 3 different characters. A Major from the Astra Militarum from the Imperial Guard, the Armageddon Steel Legion itself, if I'm not mistaken, and Adepta Sororitas, a canon. Was she a canoness? Oh, it's complex. I don't want to get into spoilers, but yeah, an Adepta Sororitas from the what's it called? The martyred lady of our martyred lady, sisterhood. And finally, of course, a Blood Angel, because they are the face of the new Armageddon box set. I don't know why I pointed behind me. I don't have the new Armageddon box set. I have the Leviathan one. But anyways, and yeah, they are the new poster boys, and they have a long history as a chapter with the planet of Armageddon. So yeah, I was very pleased to find the Blood Angels there. So first of all, the positives, I will just say straight out of the bat, I'm very torn and split with this book because there are some things in the book that I can't quite really get into because spoilers. And there is one thing that I will spoil right away because I think it is atrocious, that is not part of the marketing material, because it is revealed fairly, it might be considered a spoiler, but it is revealed fairly early in the story, and it is basically the thread that unites all 3 main stories, other than all of them taking place on Hive Tartarus. High Gothic Tartaro. Anyways, it is a space wolf. Now, if you've seen my videos before, if you follow my channel for a while, you know that as soon as a space wolf popped on the book, I rolled my eyes all the way to the back of my head, because this is one of the most space wolves that I've ever seen in a book, and just whenever a space wolf pops his filthy dog head, I'm kidding, okay, Space Wolf fans, it's just all in good fun. But I do roll my eyes to the back of my head, because I go like, okay, here it goes. Here you go. The narrative is basically they break the fourth wall. They go completely against the rest of the setting. It's like every character lives in Warhammer 40,000, and a Space Wolf comes along, and the Space Wolf is living in a different setting, and they just hopped over right over to 40,000. And yeah, that's pretty much the feeling of the book. So if you're expecting a book that focuses mainly around like the Blood Angels and the Sororitas or the Imperial Guard, the Armageddon Steel Legion, you'll find some of that here, but just be mindful, like basically like the character that unites all those threads is a Space Wolf. He's not that much in the book, but pretty much he has a very strong presence. That's all I'm willing to say in the spoiler-free version of this video. I don't care if it's considered a spoiler, because it should be part of the promotional material. Again, he gets revealed surprisingly early, and to me, I felt kind of like, oh, here we go again. Because to me, this book was sold as, okay, there's a Sororitas right on front of the page and a Blood Angel. So I thought, oh, and I read the description by not the description, but an interview by the writer. And she mentioned also the Astra Militarum guy. And I said like, oh yeah, those are all things I'm interested in like learning about and reading about and whatever. And if I had known that it was all revolving around the Space Wolf, I probably would have kicked this book to the back of my reading list, or at least my to read soon list of books. That being said, there are some interesting things that get done with this character. It's not just like your run-of-the-mill Space Marine, because Space Wolves never really are, in a sense. So, another thing about the book I want to mention, I listened to the audiobook, I didn't read the book, even though I'll say like I'll read it, but that's just my brain doing its thing. I actually listened to the book, and the voice acting was outstanding. Amazing voice acting. Quite in fact, let me just check here real quick. Sorry, I just had to hop my page over to the the audible version. It is narrated by David Seddon, Emma Gregory, and Nathaniel Priestley. Now, they are all three of them very good readers on their own right, and I have to point out something, because Emma Gregory, in case you're not aware who she is, you might not know her by name, but you might know her by some of like her more famous characters, particularly in the world of Warhammer. Well, that's her right there. That's Ship Mistress Livia Solken, for those of you who have watched Angels of Death. Or probably even more well known for her character, for playing the character of my girlfriend in Baldur's Gate 3, Minthara. Now, granted, I did have many girlfriends in Baldur's Gate 3, but if I had to choose like the one that really, as soon as she came on screen, I was like, that's the one, it might have to be Minthara for my evil playthrough, okay? For my evil playthrough. For the good playthrough, obviously either Shadowheart or Karlach, but I digress. The point is, she makes an outstanding job. She belongs in the world of Warhammer, and she's the voice of the Adepta Sororitas. Now, another cool thing that they do is that it's kind of a first to me, unless it's in one of those like dramatized novellas of Warhammer. Kind of like you'll see in the omnibus, some omnibuses, for example, sometimes. But again, in a full novel, this is the first time that I see they do like a rebreather or a vox voice effect when someone is speaking, either through a rebreather or a vox. It's not overdone, it's not invasive whatsoever, it's just like very subtle. It almost sounds like maybe the actor found a way to speak that way to make it sound that way. It doesn't sound invasive, and I don't know, I really like the voice acting in this book. That voice acting apart, if you're thinking of reading the book, let's talk a little about what you might expect to find in the book. First of all, okay, before that, I want to give props to the author, Jude Reid. I had in fact read a book of hers before which I did not like, which was the Fulgrim book, the very latest Fulgrim book that came out. I think that book, much like this one actually, was false advertising. Was false, not false, but it was false advertising and was propaganda for the Black Templars when it got advertised as an Emperor's Children book or a Fulgrim book. But that thing aside, just like this book is actually a Space Wolves book, but that might be a bit rough. But I do want to give her props because her prose, the language that she uses in this book, the images that she puts in my head, that she put in my head while I was reading or listening to this book, was very sophisticated, more sophisticated than I remember it being in other books. And in fact, I want to describe it as colorful or even poetic, but not without leaving the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. There are some very graphic images that just got placed into my head, and just her prose allowed me to envision them that much more better. And it's I don't want to spoil too many things, but just little details, like an Imperial Guard officer who cannot close his eyes without seeing just flashes of coiled barbed wire and trenches. Obviously I'm gonna butcher the actual prose because I can barely speak, even though I do have a wizard hat. I'm not the smartest person. And little other things, like someone slitting someone else, like an orc slitting someone's throat and a second mouth opening up beneath the first one. Obviously again, it's not quite explained like that, or narrated like that, but that's the image, right? And those little words kind of strike at my image generating software that I got running in my head, and she did a great job of placing those brutal images in my head, and I for one really I give props to that. Now, another positive I wanna talk about this book is the action. It never feels stale. I have read dozens and dozens, up there in the hundreds, 100 plus Warhammer books, and I've pretty much seen all sorts of action scenes. Well, these action scenes read more like a sequence, like a fight sequence in one of those movies that have actual martial artists in them. For example, The Raid or John Wick, where the action just gets prolonged and prolonged, where, this is maybe a weird comparison, but those scenes where, since the actor actually knows how to fight and the stuntmen actually know what they're doing, the camera can just sit back and let the actors do their thing. I don't know, these Tarantino-esque sequences or John Woo sequences, like action sequences, where they just let you watch the action. You just sit back and there's not many cuts. Imagine the book version of that. It just feels gritty, it feels brutal, it's easy, at least it was easy for me to follow along. I did have to slow down, but I do that often, because English is not my first language, right? So I did have to slow down the narration quite a bit, not quite a bit, but just a bit at points, because there is a lot of action that goes on in this book. And in the end, the action will be one of, if I ever read this book again, as I sometimes do, or listen to a book again, it'll likely be because of the action. That's certainly one of the highlights of the book for me. So easy to follow, especially particularly for me, the Astartes fight scenes. They are described in a way where this is how you would expect an Astartes to fight. And it was so fun for me to get to that part of the book because it goes in order, right? First you get, again, this is not a spoiler, but first you get your Imperial Guard, then your Sororitas character, and finally your Blood Angels character. And by the time you get to the Blood Angels character, you've seen sort of them struggle first from the most baseline human to the super trained Sororitas, to then an angel of death of the God Emperor of mankind, a demigod of combat, right? So the contrast there, you're whoa. By the time you get to the Blood Angels character, you're okay, that's a Space Marine, and I really, really appreciated that. Also, it's not just Bolter Corn, as people call it. They use a different word for adult entertainment. But yeah, it's not all just silly fighting, right? There is a lot more to this book. There is depth to the characters. The characters, they seem to have, don't expect to be reading Shakespeare, obviously. It's still Warhammer. It's still meant to have I don't want to say campy, but let's say a little campy action tone to it. But that is not to say that there cannot be seriousness found within the characters or depth within the characters in these stories. And actually, those are some of my favorite stories. And there is certainly that in here. There are competing philosophies between the characters. There is a lot of I don't want to say political, but there is, yeah, I'll mention it, political, philosophical, and kind of interpersonal tensions that go on with the main characters that we follow throughout this book, and those get resolved differently in the different stories that we read. In any case, I thought it was very well executed. So yeah, by all means, I think Jude Reid keeps doing this, she might become like the next Aaron Densky Bowden of the Black Library sort of catalog of authors, some of whom I really like more than others, but obviously Aaron Densky Bowden, I don't think he's writing for Black Library anymore, but you know, she reminded me a bit of that, where he also has, like, he had his more silly period of writing books, more campy books, and then he has like those books where like really graphic violence, but long sequences of violence, but they're like actually keeping you at the edge of your seat while you're following these characters go through this sequence. And then also you have like certain depth to the characters without it being like such a quick tone shift that you get whiplash from the switch. So yeah, I certainly appreciated that in Jude Reid. Again, especially the last book I've read of her, I didn't really, maybe I have to like try to read that book again, the Fulgrim one, with maybe I'll find like a sort of new appreciation now that I have liked her prose a bit better. But yeah, the first time I read it, I was just tuned out like the entire way, right? Or first time I listened to it, I should say, I was just tuned out the entire time. But this one, you know, it's one of those books that I really wanted to get to the end. Now let's go with the negatives. Unfortunately, once I got to the end of the book, I did have, again, no spoilers, but I did have some qualms with it. And mainly, I mentioned that this is hard to explain because I can't really get into it without touching on, like, heavily on spoilers. But basically, the entire narrative of the book revolves around two things. First of all, the invasion of the Orc-Wa on Armageddon. Sorry, the Orc-Wa on Armageddon. And the second thing, there is this very tense philosophical disagreement, let's call it, that starts to be, that begins to get unraveled as the story progresses, as the narrative progresses. And that one, you know, at first I thought it was like gonna be an extra of the book, like a little, just another scene from just another story arc from one, just another of the characters in the book. But by the time the book ended, I realized, oh no, this whole philosophical tension, disagreement, divide, whatever you want to call it, this whole philosophical arc gets treated as like, oh, this was the main pillar of the book, and all the characters were just revolving around this. And that's what I did not like. Now, I am a bit torn on this, because I'll have to find a way to put this without spoiling the book. But let's just say it is well written, it is engaging, it just felt very out of tone to me with the rest of Warhammer. Particularly, I'll just say it's revolving around that Space Wolves character. And I just mentioned how like the Space Wolves characters make me feel like they are from another story, from another setting, from another universe, and they just get thrown onto Warhammer for a few paragraphs or a few books here and there, and then they just piece off right onto their own timeline or whatever universe they come from. So the fact that, again, the Space Wolves character and his own, I don't know what to call it without like spoiling it, but maybe I'll touch more on it. But I am torn on it because, again, it feels like a huge, I want to call it huge disagreement with whatever else you might expect to find in Warhammer. At the same time, it is also refreshing in a way. But that might just be the pros. And now me, as a fan of the setting, I don't know how to feel about that, you know, because it is certainly introducing new things. It is certainly introducing like Space Marines, talking about the Imperium and their duty to the Emperor, talking about the Emperor himself in a way that me personally, I just don't feel sorry comfortable about. It is kind of a bit of, again, I don't want to call it fourth wall breaking, but let's just call it, there is quite a good tinge of modern day moral, I don't want to call it politics, but modern day morals, of our own morals in this book. Of saying like, oh yeah, no, this is wrong because this and that, when we're talking about characters that grow in a reality completely different to ours, that get brainwashed since birth to have certain beliefs. The fact is, and the reason why I find this like so hard to like talk about actually without spoiling it, is that also gets addressed. You know, the whole propaganda aspect of it. It also gets addressed. I just felt it was a bit too in the face and a bit too annoying. So yeah, I don't know. By the end of the book, unfortunately, don't get me wrong, it is not uncommon for a grimdark Warhammer 40,000 book or any grimdark book to leave you with a bittersweet taste in your mouth. Like, don't expect happy endings or whatever. That's not uncommon. But this one in particular, it made me feel like, oh, I was reading a different type of book. You know, some books, I'll use Joe Abercrombie as an example. Whenever you read one of his books, the endings are always bittersweet. There are not necessarily like only happy endings, but you still feel a sense of fulfillment. Like you got what you paid for, basically, in terms of your engagement with the story. Even if it's heartbreaking, even if it's sad, even if it's not what you wanted for the characters, the way he does it feels fulfilling. This book made me feel like, oh man, this was really promising a different type of story, and I'm kind of bummed that in the end it was just a bummer. I'll just call it out. This book is a bummer, okay? I'll put it like it is. I'll say it like it is. With that being said, in terms of like what you might expect to find, just reducing it down to very simple, you know, like terms, basically a summary rather. Tons of action, tons of, again, political, philosophical drama with good amount of action just sparkled here and there, but like a good amount, okay? There's a lot of action. The orcs, I really like the orcs in this book. They are kind of like a monster in a campy movie, you know? You don't see, like, you see them a lot because they're everywhere, but you don't engage with them, like you don't understand them too much. They're strange, they're alien, they're xenos, they are the other, and I really like that. That's how I like my orcs. I like them scary, I like them weird, I like them to be the filthy, horrifying, terrifying xenos scum that they should be. And the characters, they feel very well fleshed out. You know, the characters with their other flaws and virtues and vices even, for the most part, they feel very well fleshed out. Heartbreakingly for me, the least fleshed out character was the Blood Angels one, because I will just put it out there, I'll say it, I mainly wanted to read this book because of the Blood Angels, okay? I like Blood Angels, I love Blood Angels, I collect Blood Angels. I don't like, however, how the Blood Angels have often been portrayed in Warhammer. Very much like the Space Wolves, I sometimes feel like they come out of, like, just the way they are portrayed, like they pop them out of a different story, like a sillier, less grounded story, and they are like a bit dramatic or a bit wimpish at times. This book did not do that. This book just took them right down to earth and said, no, these guys are Space Marines, these guys are brutal, heartless, merciless killers. They are machines of war. They are weapons of war. No different than a bullet. Once it's fired from the gun, it's gonna just keep going straight until it hits a wall or takes care of its target or whatever. They cannot be stopped once they are unleashed. They are an unstoppable force, and an immovable English, and an immovable object when they have to be. So in that aspect, they did that very well. In the other aspect of like, oh yeah, I want to see more of that, more of their dynamics, more of their relationships, more of their I wanted to see more of them. I wanted to see more of the story revolve around them. You don't really get that. They're not really like, they are a trigger for some things that happen in the story, but they never feel like the main character. Whereas the sororitas, mainly the sororitas, she did feel more like a main character. And the major, I forget his name, Ron, I think he was Ron. He also felt like a very well fleshed out character. I'll just say it, all characters are well fleshed out. I just feel in the end like I saw way less of the Blood Angels. I just really would have liked to have seen a bit more. Maybe spend less time with the dirty, filthy dog, the Space Wolf, and more time with the Blood Angels next time. That's my that's my one little criticism, but that's personal, you know. Maybe you like the Space Wolves, or maybe you don't like them, but maybe you like what they did with the Space Wolf in this book. I invite people actually to read this book if what I've told you so far sounds interesting to you. Again, lots of action, some depth in characters, some interesting tensions between characters and their surroundings, all with the background of a massive planet-wide orc war, and of course the titular Season of Fire falling upon the main characters. So that's where I'll end up this section of the review. The spoiler-free version of the review. I'll have a lot more to say in the full spoilers version, so subscribe and activate your notifications if you want to stick around for that. With that being said, if you like to join the guard, again, also hit subscribe. If you'd like to support this little project of mine, hit like on the video or share this video with a friend if you like it, with an enemy if you did not. And if you have read this book, please comment down below your opinions on it. Did you like it? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? What things did I miss on the book that or maybe you would have liked me to comment on? Or any advice or critique for my video reviews? Again, this channel is very young. I learn a lot from every comment and I can only learn from them. So with that being said, thanks for coming, thanks for watching, Ad Astra, and as always, remember, there are no female custodies.